I'm Austinlugo.
I'm Andrew Harp.
This is With Nothing to Say.
Let's talk about Bram Stoker's Dracula.
Oh shit, I have to do a shout out. I forgot about that.
Just do it now.
Yeah, but I didn't look up.
Oh, okay.
I didn't plan 2 minutes ahead.
No, you're good.
Oh, wait.
It's like 7 there?
Yeah, I just woke up.
Oh, yeah, that's fine.
Okay, one sec. Before we get started today, just a quick shout out to the Alphanumeric podcast. Alphanumeric is a poetry podcast, and every week they release original new poetry. It's pretty cool. I've never really been much into poetry. I find listening to poetry much more exciting than reading poetry. I don't know why it is. I've always thought poetry to be something best experienced in the audio format. So I find this podcast to be incredibly exceptional. Any thoughts on poetry, Andrew?
I like it. I think poetry is best when you read it out loud.
Yeah, agreed.
There we are.
All right. 1992, Francis Ford Coppola, Bram Stoker. Stroker? Is it Stoker?
Stoker. Like, no.
You had suggested we were kind of going through a couple of different movies that we might watch. I don't know what exactly I was expecting. I mean, when you talk about Hollywood and the vampire, there's just so many movies. I don't know why Hollywood loves vampires so much.
They're awesome.
Yeah, I guess so. Jimmy, my stepdad, he's seen like every vampire movie to ever be made. Like he just loves vampire movies, vampire TV shows. He's seen it.
What does he think of this one?
He's pretty much a fan of every single vampire movie he's seen.
I went back and I watched the 1931 Dracula movie and the 1958 Dracula movie, and I'll probably talk a little bit about those as we continue. But yeah, I don't know. Vampires are kind of a good fantasy placeholder for like themes of like desire, eroticism, and sex. One of my favorite vampire movies is this movie called Martin, which is directed by George Romero. Great movie. If you can find it, it's like out of print. You can't watch it anywhere. But that's a great movie about a vampire, like a young vampire in like present time. And that movie is kind of about like addiction. He's like addicted to heroin, but he's addicted to like blood, and he needs it. You know what I mean? So you can kind of play with that.
I haven't seen a lot of vampire media. I didn't see any of the other Draculas. I had read the book before this. I didn't read it in preparation for this. I had read it for class. I've seen Nosferatu.
Right. I haven't seen that.
I've seen What We Do in the Shadows, which of course is a parody of vampire movies.
I haven't seen any of the TV shows, but I like vampires. They're interesting. There's a lot of movies that I haven't seen yet that are vampire related, especially like a lot of stuff from like the 70s and stuff, including Martin, which is a 70s movies as well. But yeah, this movie comes at a weird time, 1992. I suggested to you because it's a movie I've been wanting to watch for a while. I haven't seen all of his movies, but at this point now, I've seen all of his great movies. I watched Apocalypse Now for the first time this weekend. I've seen all the Godfather movies. I've seen The Conversation. Like all those movies are great. But I think once you get past the 70s and into the 80s, it kind of falters a little bit in terms of like his directing output. It seems like, maybe I'm wrong. But yeah, like I watched like a video about this movie, and I thought it was really interesting, and that's why I picked it. And it's Halloween time.
It's October. Spooky.
I guess like getting into it, what it kind of does is that like it's kind of interesting, and I got really lucky because I found like a really good Blu-ray copy at like a Half Price Books this past week. So last night I watched like all of like the special features, which is like a bunch of like small documentaries about the making of the movie. Incredible. But one of the things that they do is that he inserted kind of some historical stuff from like the real, quote unquote, real Dracula, Vlad the Impaler, Vlad Dracula. So, and that's kind of like more at the beginning where it's like in the 1400s, Vlad Dracula is in battle. He wins against the Turks, and he has a beautiful wife, played by Winona Ryder. Of course, Dracula is played by Gary Oldman. He defeats the Turks, but he goes and he finds that Elizabeth committed suicide because before he arrived, she received a message on an arrow that said that he had died. So she's like, I'm going to kill myself. And he gets there and he's super, super sad. And the priest tells him, like, she committed suicide, like she's in hell. Like she committed suicide, I'm sorry, but like she is like in hell. Sorry. Dracula is extremely angry, He desecrates the chapel, he renounces God, and he will now use the power of darkness to rise up from it. This whole sequence is before the opening title, and it looks amazing.
It reminds me a lot of, you haven't seen Dodes'kuzen, have you? One of Akira Kurosawa's last films.
Oh, no, I have not, no.
So Dodes'kuzen was shot almost entirely on a set, and it's like it almost looks like it's always at sunset. Like there's these beautiful background paintings, and it's a lot of orange, very similar to Paul Schrader's.
Mishima.
Yes,
Some of the production and the costumes in this movie are made by this woman. I forget her name, but it's a woman who also worked on Mishima.
that makes a lot of sense because it's just like the whole feel of the film, like all the different like oranges and reds, and they use a lot of painted backdrops. It just feels very ethereal and fantastical. Like it doesn't seem to use a lot of real sets, which sometimes I have problems with that kind of thing. Like I'm a big fan of shooting on location. I love kind of on location shoots. But I think in this it works because it's creating this fantastical world. And another thing that we'll get into as we talk about this, something that Francis Ford Coppola seems really interested is not making so much a modern film. And I read a lot about how he had a digital effects team that he just like didn't really give a shit about.
He talks about that on one of the special features. He's like, I told them exactly what I wanted, but they kept on pushing me to do what everybody else was doing, and then I fired them. And then he hired a son.
Yeah. Which is just awesome. And, you know, honestly, like, I think at the time I understand why people were mad because they're like, oh, we got to use this, you know, fancy new CGI and like this kind of stuff. But if they had used that like back in 1992, the film would have looked like shit.
It would have aged really bad.
Really would have. And the fact they used almost all in camera techniques, even though like some of the techniques are like old techniques, I think it works because partly it's fantastical and also just because watching the film, it doesn't feel like a film that came out in 1992. It kind of feels like a film outside of time. There's a lot of techniques that kind of use from like way back in like the 20s and 30s. And it creates like this really strange feeling. Like if I didn't know the film came out in 1992, and I didn't, of course, know this just kind of star-studded cast: Keanu Reeves, Winona Ryder, Anthony Hopkins, Gary Oldman, and so on and so forth. You could honestly tell me this film could have been made in like 1960 or like 2004, and I honestly you wouldn't know the difference just because it is there's a lot about it that's so outside of time. And even talking about that opening sequence, that fight scene, which is used with like
It's these puppets, yeah.
Yeah, it's incredible.
Yeah, it looks great. I love when he stabs the cross and a bunch of blood spurts out. I love when he does that. I love his armor too. His like weird ribbed kind of muscly looking armor. That was of course designed by that one person. Yeah, I just love the whole sequence, and that kind of sets off the movie. He's Dracula. He's going to be a vampire. That's pretty much the idea. And then we're cutting back like nearly like 400 years later in the 1890s, like when the book happens. Jonathan Harker, he is going to take on Count Dracula as a client, which I believe is probably the beginning of the book. I haven't read the book. From his colleague Renfield, who went insane and he's now an inmate in Jack Seward's insane asylum, who Jack Seward will be a character later on. And Jonathan, he's basically traveling to Transylvania to arrange like a real estate acquisitions in London because Dracula is buying a bunch of land in London. He's buying a bunch of homes in London. And it's revealed too that Keanu Reeves, he has a fiance who looks a lot like, suspiciously looks a lot like Elizabeth. And he is going to travel to Transylvania, which that whole part where he's traveling to Transylvania is very, very good.
Another just incredible scene. I think travel scenes are just, I mean, they've been done like a million times before. And I think this one just like, I don't know, there's something about it that's just absolutely beautiful and magnificent. And it kind of uses some of those like old techniques of like, you know, it'll be like a close up of his face and it'll be like superimposed on like, you know, a train traveling or like him writing letters. It's so like orange and red and beautiful. I know Keanu Reeves has kind of talked about how he's disappointed by his performance in this. Well, what do you think of his performance in this?
He sucks. He's the worst part of the movie, in my opinion. He kind of takes the air out of everything. And in the next scene that I'm about to discuss, where he goes to the castle, he really takes kind of the air out of everything in terms of like the acting and the performances. He's not like the worst thing ever, but I didn't like him very much. All the young actors and stuff, like, they're pretty good. Like Winona, good for sure. they're all pretty good for the most part, but they do pale in comparison to some of the older actors, including like Oldman, especially Oldman, and Hopkins as well.
Yeah, I don't know how fair it is to compare Winona Ryder and Keanu Reeves, who are at this point 1992. They're pretty fresh in the world of acting. To compare them to Anthony Hopkins and Gary Oldman, who are some of the greatest actors of all time, and just incredible performances. I'll agree, Keanu Reeves' performance in this, which I love Keanu Reeves. I think he's pretty great. I don't know if I've like ever seen a Keanu Reeves performance and I'm like, oh, that's an incredible performance. But everything I've seen him in, he's always really fun. John Wick, The Matrix, Bill and Ted, all that stuff. He's always a good time. This is definitely subpar Keanu Reeves, because I think part of the problem is just like Keanu Reeves was badly cast for the part.
Probably, yeah.
And I guess like Francis Ford Coppola didn't want Keanu Reeves at first, but there was kind of like, I guess they wanted someone like younger and like to like get like younger audiences in, supposedly, which makes sense. You'd pick someone like Keanu Reeves because he was kind of like a heartthrob at the time, but he does feel like ill-fitted for the part, and his whole performance is kind of, I don't know, it's almost like flat, I guess would be the best way to describe it. Like it's a very flat performance, I think.
I guess kind of talking about Keanu a little bit more though, we can transition to when he visits the castle, which is a great scene in itself. Him visiting Dracula in his mansion in Transylvania, his big giant castle. Of course, this movie has tons of miniatures of buildings which look great. And he goes there, and Gary Oldman looks crazy. He's got like this like he got his like forehead is shaved back, and he's got this like crazy like white hair that's like really long, and he's got kind of like this like Asian influence like red long robe as well. Like he looks awesome. I believe, yeah, like he looks really, really good. He's got his like face is like really white and kind of like wrinkly, like he's super old. And he like welcomes Keanu, and he's super old and sad and stuff because of course he like doesn't have like a wife or girlfriend. Well, he has girlfriends, but he doesn't have a wife. And they're walking around the castle, which is very eerie and dark, and they kind of talk about business and stuff like that, and they have like dinner. And
Yeah, the shadows are just, that's one of like my favorite effects in the film, because like I guess the idea was that shadows and sort of like physics kind of work differently around when the vampire's around. So there's like a lot of things like walking on ceilings, like rats and stuff, and like things move in all these different directions. And the shadows kind of act outside of, and there's a lot of like cool moments where like Keanu Reeves will think he's like talking to Dracula. The shadow will be like in one place, and then like Gary Oldman will like walk out in from another direction. It's just incredible. I love those shadows. They're just so like intricate and detailed and so weird. It's awesome.
it's like I saw it. It's like someone else doing it, like during like in the shot. So it's like not like added in, of course. It's all in camera. So it's like another person off screen doing the shadow while they're acting. That's unbelievable, dude. That's crazy. Yeah, and like, just to kid you on, like Jonathan, you meets Dracula, like we talked about, and Dracula sees a picture of Mina, his fiance, who looks exactly like Elizabeth, and Elizabetta or whatever, and he believes that it's the reincarnation of his lost love. To kind of skip over to another scene, the scene where like Keanu's shaving and stuff is also really good, where that's great because I think it's like a hole in the wall, and then Keanu is in the hole, so it's like filming him dead on, and he's shaving, and then the person being filmed from behind is like a double, because like a hand comes up and touches Dracula on the shoulder, and you don't see his reflection. That's because that's not a mirror, that's a hole in the wall where Keanu is. And basically Jonathan is fed upon by his brides, his concubine of vampire women. And Dracula, he's getting his boxes of Transylvanian soil because he needs that to like live, I guess, to sleep on. And he's going to take up residence at Carfax Abbey, which he recently bought from Keanu Reeves. And like I said, Keanu during this part of the movie, which is really kind of where he acts the most, it's in the castle pretty much. I don't know. One, like we talked about, it just feels like Gary Oldman would like just say like this incredible line or set of lines, and it's just beautiful, and then Keanu would just kind of come in and it'd be like, oh, like kind of deflated the whole thing. And like Gary Oldman's crazy. He like changes his voice and stuff. I don't know.
Yeah. I was just gonna say that I think part of it is certainly Keanu Reeves' performance is certainly underwhelming. And then on the other hand, Keanu Reeves is kind of given a role that doesn't really do a lot. Like he's kind of a like his role is kind of I mean, more towards the end he kind of does some stuff, but his role is basically just to kind of exist, which isn't great. He's basically just constantly at the whim of others. So, I guess in that sense, like the performance kind of does reflect, but it's hard to say like, is it the performance that's reflecting kind of this character development, or is it like the character that's reflecting performance?
Like I said, the young actors, they're all right. Um, in London, kind of like talking a little bit what's going on in London. In London, you have Mina and you have her friend Lucy, and they're kind of talking about like love and sex and stuff like that. This movie is pretty erotic. It's a pretty sexy movie. Uh, and like and I think you get like a fun party where you're introduced to like the three like suitors basically of Lucy, who are great. I really like those characters. It's like I don't remember their names. I think there's Arthur, who's like a lord or a sir or some shit like that. He's played by Carrie Elwes. I forget his last name. He's the Princess Bride Saw guy. And then you have like the doctor guy, and you have the like American guy.
No, he's Australian.
In real life?
I think he's supposed to be Australian in the movie.
Oh, I thought it was American.
I think they say he's Australian.
Hmm.
Maybe not. Maybe someone else is Australian. Because I remember a line where they say someone is Australian. It could have been someone else. She has a lot of suitors. He might be American.
Yeah, she has like three suitors, and I like when she meet everyone, and she's meeting everyone and talking to them. She's wearing like a snake dress. That's really cool. All the outfits are, once again, really good. And yeah, they're kind of like opposites. They do a good job, kind of like bouncing off one another. Lucy's kind of like, I wouldn't say like she's kind of she really really wants a suitor. She really wants a boyfriend. And Mina, she's kind of reserved and conservative, and she's like, I have a fiance, like I have a fiance. And they there's that one interesting scene where it's like raining, because I think it's storming, because I think Dracula is arriving into London. So it's kind of like, once again, it's like where Dracula goes, things are a little off.
Yeah, Dracula's one of the things. I mean, I don't really care, but one of the things I found confusing about this film is Dracula's powers are vague in a certain sense. I mean, I don't care. It's kind of like it's awesome. I think that's part of like the frightening thing is you don't really know what he can do. But I guess like he can partly control wind and weather in like a certain sense. And so that scene where it's raining, and this is probably one of the first moments where you just realize just how kind of bonkers and insane this movie is, especially from someone. I mean, you talk about films like Apocalypse Now or The Godfather, which of course are haunting and have moments that are absolutely terrifying. But you talk about those films are films that, especially with Apocalypse Now, it's a very quiet film. It's a lot of like sitting around and looking at these kind of terrifying moments. Where this film, there's so much movement and like so much going on, and the editing style is just kind of insane. And once we get into like the rain and like some of these other moments, they're just like, it's so weird and strange, and definitely not something you would expect from someone who at this point, Francis Ford Coppola, by the time he makes this, he's like in his what 60s, 50s.
Yeah, what like
He's born in 39, so
yeah, he's probably in his 60s by this point.
I read a review that said like it feels like a first time filmmaker or like a student filmmaker, in the sense that, I mean, the reviewer didn't like the film, but I will agree with them in the sense that this film just like, it feels like Francis Ford Coppola is like just like fuck it, like we'll just do whatever, and it feels insane.
I love it. I love the feel of it. It's much more exciting than like it's a movie and filmed in front of a green screen. And I think it's also more exciting to kind of, like you said, like, yeah, like his powers aren't necessarily defined, but like it's more exciting when you're like, what is he gonna do? And when he does something, it's like, whoa, that's exciting. He did that, especially later in the movie. So I think, yeah, more or less, like Lucy reveals, like, I'm marrying Arthur, who's the Princess Bride guy. I'm sorry, I don't remember his name. I don't. I know his last name. I don't know how to pronounce it. Elwes, whatever. I like when he yells at Anthony Hopkins. It's like remember that scene where he like points the gun at him and he yells like really loud at Anthony Hopkins. What did you do? I don't know why that was funny, but for some reason Lucy's sick. She is kind of like like in bed and she's kind of gyrating around and she's really sick and I think the Dr. Seward is like, we should get Van Helsing, Dr. Van Helsing. He knows a lot about obscure diseases, which is played by Anthony Hopkins. I like two. So, and Van Helsing shows up, and they're trying to check it out. And Van Helsing sees like the two marks, and he's like, "Oh, okay, it's a vampire." By the way, I like how Anthony Hopkins plays Van Helsing in this one. In the two movies that I've seen about Dracula, the thing that I think they don't do right, and it might be bad to say that I do like the 1931 and 1958 movies a lot, but the thing about those movies that I just feel is missing from this movie, even though those movies are great and they look great and they're totally unique, is that Dracula is more of a monster, like a monster of the week villain, and less of like a tragic hero, anti-hero guy, which I think is way more interesting when played that way. Van Helsing is also like shown as the hero in both movies that can do no wrong, while in this movie, Van Helsing, I would say, is more like a crazy scientist. Like he's kind of like bonkers and he's kind of like more off the wall, which I find more interesting than like, I don't know, just like a guy who's like normal, who's just like really smart, like in the other two movies. Those other two movies are very good, but I like it more when like, things are a little bit more like, who's bad, who's good. I like that way more.
Yeah, this movie definitely seems to be a movie where it's hard to say like who is the good guy or who is the bad guy here. I mean, there's definitely like characters that you root for and characters that you don't necessarily root for. But Anthony Hopkins' character, which part of it is just a very well written character, and then of course Anthony Hopkins just gives an incredible performance. And I think this is probably, because typically when I see Anthony Hopkins performances, of course you think of his most famous film that came out by this time, which is The Silence of the Lambs, right, which came out like just before this, or like a year or two before this, where he gives a very like intense performance. But I've always found Anthony Hopkins to be very able to create these something that's intense, but it's also like kind of holding back, right? He's able to be intense without having to like yell or scream, especially when you talk about Hannibal Lecter, right? He very rarely ever is like and yeah, he's like terrifying. But in this, they kind of give Anthony Hopkins more room to kind of like move around, right?
He kind of has fun with it.
Yeah, he seems to like really be having fun with the part. He's just like all over the place. And I kind of love this vibrant Anthony Hopkins that you don't really see a lot, like someone who's very kind of like emotional and kind of just all over the place.
Once again, I like that way more than just like the normal scientist guy that they do in the other movies. I like that way more. I think it's more fun and more interesting. And then I think you get around this time, kind of one of my favorite sequences is when Dracula meets Mina. He basically on the street, right? And Dracula, at this point, he is swagged out. Like he has swag now. Like his outfit is so crazy. Like he's got like, it's like a steampunky kind of thing, but like I'm not a steampunk guy, so if you heard that just now, don't like be turned off by that. Like he's like crazy sunglasses and he's got like a big tall top hat. He's got long hair. He's swagged out. Like he looks great. And he does this thing where like he looks at Mina and he's like, see me. Like he's like trying to like, also one of the liberties that they make is that they don't do the thing where it's like at daytime the sunlight kills him. They're just like, it just makes him weaker. Like he's not as powerful. He can still do things, but not as much, which I'm fine with that liberty. It's fine. But he looks young and handsome. And he meets Mina, and Mina's like, go away, you suck. And this thing where like he teleports and stuff and he charms her. And I think they go to like a little like movie theater, right?
Yeah.
I like that scene. I like that sequence. It's nice.
Yeah. I think with the school, it's clearly like Francis Ford Coppola's kind of homage to film, because it's supposed to be like 1890 something. So very early cinema. And of course the the films you see, one of them is a pornography, which the first film ever made, well, the first almost anything is almost always pornography because humans. And then, of course, the other film they show is one of the most famous first films, which is just a train coming towards the camera, right? There's that famous story about this group of people who had never seen a film before watching basically just a train coming towards the camera and like screaming and yelling, like, ah! I mean, they don't do that in this, but it's clearly an homage to that. And I guess like Dracula, I guess it's like some sort of like astro projection kind of thing is what's going on. Because like a lot of times, I mean, not yet, but later on, what she sees is very different from like what other people see. So I guess like he's able, like I guess he's not like really walking around or like not there all of the time, which is why he's kind of able to like teleport and stuff or something like that.
Yeah, I think he's able to. Yeah, they show that he can like sort of like become like a figment or like become like a ghost to people. Like several times where like Dracula like will be attacking Lucy and stuff, and then they'll burst in and Lucy's just by herself.
Yeah.
He can like transform. That's the thing about like Dracula that's really cool in this too. He transforms into many different things, and has many different looks. So like he'll change into like different animals, and he changes into shadows and into fog. And in this, circumstances, he's a swagged out young gentleman. I think that scene ends with like there's like a wolf, right, walking around, which is kind of weird. Like the way that it walks around is like kind of funny. And then like Mina gets scared, and then because he's like a vampire, he's able to like calm it down and stuff. And basically Mina is falling in love with Dracula, basically, because he's swagged. We receive word. We kind of cut back to Jonathan though, right? I think.
And Jonathan, I guess like the three female concubines or whatever have been like, slowly draining the blood, Jonathan. But I guess he somehow like gets like out on like a window and he like shimmies his way off, falls into a river or something, and he drags himself to an abbey, I believe.
Like a church, yeah.
Like a church full of nuns. And that's when the nuns contact Mina and they're like, hey, your fiance dude, he's here. He's kind of insane, but we got him. He's okay.
Yeah, she gets the letter and they're like, you should come to Transylvania and get married to him. And she debates with herself about it because like I think she really really likes because they go on a few more dates, I think, right? Like they had that little date where they drink absinthe, right? So they're like seeing each other, and he's using his powers to kind of like almost like hypnotize her a little bit, kind of like get her to like really like him. He is like a like I said, handsome guy. He's cool. He's slick. They're having fun. They're drinking absinthe and stuff. But she's like, no, Jonathan, I have to marry that guy. And so like, yeah, she like gets on a boat and she goes to Transylvania, and she like writes a letter to Dracula that's like, I'm going to go marry Jonathan. I will never see you again. And he gets like very angry.
Yeah, that scene is just awesome because he starts crying and like blood is like everywhere. It's like coming out of his like mouth and nostrils and eyes.
Weird pugnacious face, kind of like he's almost like in the middle of a transformation.
Yeah, he's like his face is all like contorted and weird, and it just looks and like he's like in this room full of candles, and it looks like he's almost on like a stage or something. And the makeup is beautiful. Just everything about it is just beautiful and magnificent and weird. Of course, Gary Oldman just gives like this perfect performance of like equally sad and angry.
Yeah, and he's so angry that he's like, you know what? Screw this. I'm gonna kill Lucy, and that's kind of what he does. But at this point, Van Helsing, and the crew, the shooters, kind of like are kind of on board with Van Helsing, and they're like, okay, let's defend Lucy, make sure she doesn't die. Dracula wipes the floor with them. He destroys them. He simply pushes them, and he transforms Lucy into a vampire and basically kills her. And then they kind of have like a little funeral and stuff. And once again, like Hopkins in that role is so funny because I love the scene. I love the part where like they're at the funeral and everyone's really sad, and he's talking, and Van Helsing is talking to the doctor, and he's like, yeah, I really want to, yeah, I need this instrument to do this to her. I'm like, what, you're going to do an autopsy now or later or something like that? No, I just want to like cut off her head and take out her heart. Like, and so like they bury her like in a sarcophagus. Like, okay. And they, of course, like, they're like, all right, let's get in there, guys. And they open it up and she's gone. They're like, whoa, okay. And she comes down and she's got like her wedding dress on, which looks great. It's got like this like weird winged like cap on, and like the dress is very like ornate. And she has like a little girl with her that she's obviously going to eat. I love too when she in that scene, where she's going down the stairs and the candles turn on.
Yeah.
That was shot backwards. So she was going up the steps backwards, and they had the candles, and then they extinguished them.
That's awesome.
Isn't that great? Like it's like whoa. Like I thought that like I honestly thought that like they had the technology to be able to turn the candles like on. Like they had like maybe some like electric candle thing where you could like just press a button. But I guess if you want to use like real looking wax candles, you probably can't do that. So it's like
Cool.
I love watching like I was watching the special features and like I was cracking up seeing everybody, all the production people like do various things. Like there's one part, where they're in the garden and they're like, oh, it's raining. Like they feel like drops on them. They like show a guy like right above them, like on a step stool holding like an eyedropper thing. Like, for like the drops of water. Like that's beautiful. Like it's just a guy like whose job is to all right, let's go. Okay. Yeah, just unbelievable. They saved the girl and they kill Lucy. They stab her in the heart. She pukes blood on Anthony Hopkins' face, on Van Helsing's face. Very good. And then they just fucking cut off her head. Yeah, pretty violent.
That seems pretty brutal. And the little girl seems genuinely just like terrified of the whole situation, which makes sense because you're being carried by a woman who looks like a vampire. And
once again, there's like a special features part that they filmed where like she's like in her outfit and she's holding the little girl. It's like they're not filming. It's like film of them like waiting, and like the girl is like freaking out. Like the child actor and like the mom has to come over and like and the actress too. I don't know her name, but the actress is like I don't know what to do. Like but they kill the hell out of Lucy.
Sure do.
And Mina and John are back in London. I like to. John has white hair because I'm guessing because he's just like been through it, right? Like just I'm guessing that's why.
Yeah. Yeah.
And they all kind of decide to, with Helsing, destroy Count's Dracula's like boxes of soil, which he needs to survive in London.
I think one of the interesting things they do with Keanu Reeves' character, and I'm not saying like Keanu Reeves necessarily does a very good job of this, but I think one of the things that they kind of play with, and like I kind of wish they did a little bit more with, is Keanu Reeves has this sort of PTSD about the whole experience, right? Which I love. I kind of wish they would have kind of looked more into his sort of the sanity of his character because they're so, I guess because they're so invested in like Dracula and like vampires and like these these phenomenons being real, they're not as interested in kind of like the sanity of these characters. But I think it's interesting the little that they do kind of play with Keanu Reeves' characters and this idea that he is someone who's had this traumatic experience and he's cut off from the rest of the world, right? He can't really connect with anyone in the same way, right? If someone comes back from war or terror or any traumatic event, they're kind of, it's as if they don't exist in the world, and that's kind of how Keanu Reeves plays this character coming after he comes back from Transylvania. He's like in love with Winona, but like he never like shows any real affection for her, and he struggles to kind of be there, I guess.
That might be that just might be because he's bad, but
Could be.
But you're right. Maybe they should have given him more material, but then again, maybe not. I don't know. But yeah, I see what you mean. Under the right actor, it could, and with the right additions, that character could have been a little bit more full, for sure. I totally agree with you. Yeah, I think they're scared that Mina's going to get fucked up. So For some reason, they decided to put her in Seward's quarters, which is in the insane asylum where Renfield is.
And we haven't really talked about Renfield at all.
Yeah,
But he's kind of like, I do love the first image because Renfield's like the first person we cut to in the 1800s, like post like the opening credits. I love that opening sequence with him because it's like a super wide lens. It's shot from like super high, and it looks insane and just so weird and strange. And every time really they shoot with him. I mean, first of all, we haven't really talked about. I mean, all the set designs are incredible, but the set design of the insane asylum.
yeah, it's crazy. They have like these like, cubes on their heads.
Yeah, what is up with that? Like they're like the guards. Like why are they?
That's like a thing. That must be like a real thing or something like that. You know, it just must be like an 1890s thing they thought of. I have no idea. I'm guessing it's just like protection or something, like a helmet or like a face mask or like I don't know. Like it was just kind of it was
A square cage.
I love it though. You know, like
Yeah.
a cube on their head. Not that, but it's not the patients. It's the I think it's the like the doctors and the guards. Yeah.
I guess like the way I was thinking of it is like maybe because like Renfield kind of like he tries to bite people sometimes or like tries to
Yeah.
so maybe like it's to stop him from doing that. I don't
Yeah.
know.
Renfield played by Tom Waits, by the way.
Yeah.
Very
Which
good.
is another great casting choice.
Yeah, that was a good casting choice for sure. Yeah, he acts pretty crazy. He's good. But yeah, Renfield, yeah, like you said, he pops up here and there, and he's obsessed with Dracula because Dracula told him that that if he does his bidding, he can be immortal. So he's like very upset. And Mina talks to Renfield about Dracula, and he warns Mina. He's like, you should leave because Dracula is gonna get you. And then Dracula, kind of basically because he's all knowing, omnipotent, he hears that Renfield did that, and he becomes like like fog, like a green gas,
Fog. Yeah.
and he comes in and he kills Renfield.
Or Renfield. He was just trying to
I know he just wanted to be immortal.
that's all he wanted. He's just eating his bugs, birds.
Yeah,
Gross. So gross. Awesome though.
he's very good.
And he's just killed. They just kill him. And Anthony Hopkins, all the others, they're burning soil. They're throwing holy water on burning things. And Dracula, after killing Tom Waits' Renfield, goes into Winona's room. And another very sexy scene where he's like, or she's like, "Hey, let's. I want to be with you. You know, I want to have sex."
Yeah, yeah. She's like, "I love you," and then but he basically confesses he's Dracula.
Yeah,
And she gets upset.
which is fair. But she's still like, she's into it after a moment. Like she's upset, but then she's like, you know what? I'm down with that. I'm cool with
She says she remembers like Elizabeta's previous life.
yeah.
And then yeah, she's like, I want to be a vampire too. And he's like, okay. And basically like that whole scene is really good, by the way. And especially too when the hunter's bus burst in.
Yes.
Very good.
That yes. So like the scene, it's filmed almost like a sex scene, sort of like the whole like biting of her, which is very like that often vampires kind of use this like this sort of sensual kind of talking about the Victorian era and all these different things and so like he's like kind of resistant and you could see this earlier in the film because he was gonna turn her into a vampire earlier, but he's kind of resistant because he's like, hey, being immortal like kind of sucks, kind of awful.
That's bad.
And he doesn't like want to curse her with it, but she's like, no, I want to do it. I want to be a Dracula. I want to be immortal. I don't want to
be vampire. Yeah.
And yeah. And she's like, well, I guess so. And so she like drinks his blood, and it's like all sexual.
Yeah.
And the vampire hunters come in, and no longer is young steampunk Dracula there, but this just insane looking bat monster, like 9 foot tall monster, which just looks incredible.
Looks really good.
Yeah.
It's like kind of scary. Like what if you saw that in real life? Yeah, he like gets mad, and then after that too, he turns into a bunch of little rats and he escapes. Yeah, he escapes. They tried. And Mina is changing into a vampire. And he is able to learn that Van Helsing is able to learn through Mina that Dracula is going back to Transylvania in his last remaining box of soil. Once again, he needs like the soil to live. So the hunters leave because I think they say that like they'll be coming in from the land, but no, they'll be on boat, I think. Well, I forget. I guess they're going by boat, right?
No, so the vampire's going by boat and they're going by train.
Gotcha. Okay.
So they're like, we're gonna be able to beat them there because like the boat's gotta go, they like show a map, like the boat's gotta go like all the way fucking around Europe. And they're like on a train and they're going through. They're going like straight through. So like we're gonna beat them there and it's all gonna be good. But of course, Dracula being all knowing, he's like, gotcha. So he like pushes in like this fog, which I guess like the train can't go in with fog or something like that.
Yeah.
And so then instead by train, they're like, okay, uh, some of us will go by horse, but I guess Anthony Hopkins and Winona Ryder,
They split up.
they split up. Yeah, they get there first.
Anthony,
I think. Yeah.
Yep. They get there first. They're the people that get there first, and then the hunters are kind of able to intercept Dracula. Like they kind of meet at the same time, and then they kind of get involved in this little fight where they're shooting at each other. They're trying to get Dracula. But Van Helsing and Winona Ryder, they're there at the castle and they're talking and hanging out. You had the concubines come in and they kind of sort of manipulate them to kind of like kiss Winona Ryder and Anthony Hopkins. But Anthony Hopkins, he breaks free of that and he kills the gypsies, the concubine. He like cuts off their heads and throws them in the water.
The river.
He's like, yeah, he he also like, doesn't he also like put a communion wafer on her forehead just to get her to stop too? And he like makes, and then I think I think they all then arrive at the castle, and then there's another big fight, of course, where I think like Dracula like bursts from his box, and he's got this crazy golden like robe on too, and he looks really old. Unfortunately, during the battle, I think the Australian American guy, he gets stabbed in the back, which is sad. He's a good character, but yeah, he bursts out of his coffin. Jonathan slits his throat and then stabs him in the heart. But Mina's like, no, like she's like all upset and stuff.
I like the way this film is very sexy and steamy, but I was afraid coming into this movie that would be very sort of derogative is not really the right word, but kind of like the female characters are kind of just these damsel in distress.
Yeah.
And I don't think Winona Ryder's character is that. I don't think Mina is that. I think that's they kind of give her a lot of complex feelings, and the way they kind of play this final part of the film is really interesting because right, you think kill Dracula, Mina's safe, she goes back to her husband, and they live happily ever after. But that's not what happens, which I think is interesting. Keanu Reeves' character is like, I killed him, but you want to stay with him, so that you made your bed, lie in it. It's like whatever, which is interesting.
Yeah, they go into Dracula's castle, and Dracula is like dying. He's like ancient, and they're at the chapel and they're talking, and she kisses him, and that kind of and that like he reverts into his younger form, and then the cross that he stabbed in the beginning is like repairs itself, and Dracula is like, give me peace. He still has like kind of like the sword in him, and Mina like thrusts it all the way down. He dies, and the mark on her forehead disappears because now she's no longer a vampire. And then she decapitates him. Which is like, whoa, okay, I guess I forgot you have to cut his head off. And then she looks up at it's like a painting of Vlad and Elizabeth reunited, I guess, and that's kind of the idea of the movie, I guess. And that's the end of the movie. Bram Stoker's Dracula.
Good ending. I enjoyed the ending a lot. Maybe a little, I don't know. Well, part of me kind of, because like he a lot of the time is able to kind of like create this illusion of who he is. Like part of me thinks that what she's seeing isn't really like what's happening. Like maybe he's not actually being forgiven, but she's kind of created this illusion of looking for him being saved. I mean, I like the idea of him being saved and being but I don't know. I mean, it's a good ending. I think it's it's definitely not like drawn out or anything, which is nice. I hate drawn out endings, and it definitely just kind of like gets the point and then it's done.
Yeah, I like the endings in the old movies. The old movies are like, we killed Dracula and we saved the girl. We're done. And they walk away. Like that's literally how the 1931 version ends. They kill Dracula, like they put a stake through his heart. He
Yep.
screams. They save the girl, and then they walk away. And then that's like the end of the movie. Wow. Of course, once again, I like how this movie is kind of plays around with the idea of Dracula more than just a monster. He's a tragic person. He is afflicted with this curse. He believes that his lovely wife is in hell because she thought he died. It's sad.
Well, Andrew, final thoughts and rating?
Yeah. Final thoughts. Yeah, I mean, Coppola, he did. I think he did a great job. I love the movie a lot. I think that from a filmmaking perspective, it's like a 10 out of 10 for sure. Just from the filmmaking, just from the production quality of it. The production quality, I mean, is just incredible. Shadows, puppets, in camera effects, just everything, things that you wouldn't expect to be an in-camera effect is an in-camera effect. Miniatures, paintings, just the whole like gamut of just film trickery that basically untouched by a computer, and it really makes a difference in kind of like creating a tone that's also very eerie and kind of strange and off, especially of course when the Dracula character is around, because like we talked about, when he's around, things are kind of like weird and different. Gary Oldman is great in the role. He transforms into many different faces and costumes, probably a few that we weren't able to mention. I think the thing that pulls it back is, sometimes the story can be a little confusing, and just a little bit though, it's not a big deal. And I think Keanu Reeves, he's just not super great. He's not in it a lot of the time, but in the parts that he is, it just kind of takes the air out of everything, and it's a little hard for me to forgive it. But still, it's not the worst thing in the world. And yeah, once again, great movie. I'll give it an 8 out of 10.
Yeah, I definitely reciprocate almost everything you just said. From a filmmaker's perspective, just basically a masterpiece. I mean, just genuinely just a film school, and watching film, just every moment you're just like, it's one of those films where you can watch and you're still like trying to figure out how'd they do this or how'd they do that, which doesn't happen too often, especially I suppose now, where it's just like, we'll just CGI it, right? We'll just CGI this whole scene.
Yeah.
We're just gonna be in front of a green screen or whatever, and let's have them
do that, computer. Oh, okay.
I love this film. I love everything about it. It's crazy. It's insane. It's bonkers. As you said, Keanu Reeves' performance definitely is the most lacking in the entirety of the film. I don't think it bothered me as much as it bothered you, probably just because I'm super forgiving of Keanu Reeves. Because I love Keanu Reeves. Seems like a really nice guy. Seems to be doing good stuff. So I'm pretty forgiving on that end. I think I'm trying to think like complaints they really have about the film. I don't know if I really have any complaints about the film. I don't think it's a perfect film, but I think, yeah, I think I'm gonna give this a 9 out of 10. It's just incredible on every level, and I just had a great time every minute of it. Just genuinely a great time.
Hell yeah! Glad you liked it.
All right, y'all. Thank you for listening. You can find me at Austinlugo12.
You can find me on Twitter at ADHarp24.
And you can find this podcast wherever you get your podcasts. You can also find us on YouTube and Instagram at With Nothing to Say Podcast. And thank you all for listening.
Thank you again.